Sarah Jenkins wiped the counter at Sal's 24-hour eats for the 100th time that night, the smell of stale grease and burnt coffee clinging to her hair like a second skin. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The diner was mostly empty, save for a trucker snoring in the back booth and a couple of college kids trying to sober up over a plate of chili cheese fries. Sarah sighed, checking her watch. 3 more hours. Then she could go home, sleep for 4 hours, and head to her second job at the laundromat. Her back ached, a dull throb that had become her constant companion since she started pulling double shifts to pay for her mother's dialysis treatments. The medical bills were a mounting tide, threatening to drown them both. The bell above the door jingled, a harsh sound against the drumming rain. A gust of wind blew in, carrying a spray of water and a figure that looked like he was made of grey shadows. He was an old man, perhaps in his late 70s, soaking wet. He wore a trench coat that might have once been expensive, but was now sodden and heavy. He wasn't wearing a hat, and his thinning white hair was plastered to his skull. He stood in the doorway, blinking rapidly, looking around the diner with a profound, heartbreaking confusion. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket, except he was a grown man with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much. "Sit anywhere, hun," Sarah called out, her voice softening. She had a soft spot for the elderly, maybe because she wished someone would look after her mum if she weren't there. The man shuffled to a booth near the window, his movements stiff. Sarah grabbed a pot of fresh coffee and a menu. When she reached his table, she saw he was shivering violently. His hands, resting on the formica table, were shaking. "Rough night out there," Sarah said, flipping a mug over and pouring the steaming liquid. "You want a towel? I've got some clean rags in the back. Not fancy, but dry." The old man looked up at her. His eyes were a startling shade of icy blue, sharp, intelligent, but currently clouded with a fog of disorientation. I don't know," he stammered. His voice was gravelly. "I was walking. The car. I stepped out of the car." "It's okay," Sarah soothed. "Drink this. It's on the house." He took the mug with both hands, the ceramic rattling against his teeth as he took a sip. "Thank you," he whispered. You're very kind." He ordered a slice of cherry pie. He ate it slowly, savoring every bite as if he hadn't eaten in days. Sarah watched him from behind the counter, worried. He didn't look like the homeless regulars. His shoes, though muddy, were Italian leather. There was a gold signet ring on his pinky finger. Then the trouble started. Sal, the owner, waddled out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a filthy apron. Sal was a man who counted every penny and treated his employees like potential thieves. He spotted the old man. "Hey, you!" Sal barked, marching over. "You gonna pay for that? I seen you come in. You look like you got nothing." The old man flinched, the spell of peace broken. He patted his pockets, his expression turning from confused to panicked. "My wallet. I must have left it in the other coat. I have money, I swear." "Yeah, sure. Other coat." "I heard that one," Sal sneered. He grabbed the half-eaten pie plate. "Get out, before I call the cops." "Sal, stop!" Sarah rushed around the counter. "He's an old man. It's pouring rain." "I don't run a charity, Sarah. You want to feed him? You pay for it." The old man looked humiliated. He started to rise, his legs trembling. "I will go. I apologize." Sarah looked at the man's defeated posture. She thought of her own father, who had died alone because they couldn't afford a better hospital. She felt a surge of protective anger. "No," Sarah said firmly. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her tips for the night. It was $22, money she needed for the electric bill. She slammed a $20 bill onto the table. "I'm paying for it." "Leave him alone, Sal." Sal snatched the money, sneering. "Fine, but he gets out as soon as he's done." He stormed back to the kitchen. The old man looked at Sarah, tears welling in his blue eyes. "You didn't have to do that, miss. I have money. It's okay," Sarah said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "My name is Sarah. What's yours?" "Arthur," he said. "My name is Arthur." "Well, Arthur, you finish your pie. Stay as long as you need to dry off." Arthur reached out and took her hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Sarah," he repeated, as if memorizing it, "you are a good girl, a rare thing. I won't forget this." He finished his pie, and 20 minutes later, he left. Sarah watched him disappear into the rainy night, feeling a pit in her stomach. She was out $20, and she still had 3 hours of her shift left. She didn't know that she had just saved the life of Arthur the Artichoke Moretti, the retired consigliere of the Chicago outfit, who had wandered away from his bodyguards during a momentary lapse of dementia, and she certainly didn't know that his son was tearing the city apart looking for him. The fallout was immediate, but not in the way Sarah expected. The next day, Sarah was fired. Sal had been looking for a reason to let her go for weeks. She refused to flirt with the high-tipping customers he liked, and she was often 5 minutes late due to her mother's care routine. The disrespect she showed him regarding the old man was the final straw. "Pack your stuff," Sal said when she walked in for her Wednesday shift. "I don't need employees who give away my profit." "I paid for it," Sarah argued, panic rising in her throat. "It's the principle. Get out." Sarah walked home in a daze. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun setting on her livelihood. She had $70 in her bank account. Rent was due in 3 days. Her mother needed a refill on her blockers. She lived in a crumbling walk-up in the Bridgeport neighborhood. As she turned the corner onto a street, she froze. 3 black SUVs were parked in front of her apartment building. They weren't police cars. They were sleeker, darker, and far more intimidating. They were Escalades with tinted windows that absorbed the light. Neighbors were peering out from behind curtains. A group of teenagers who usually loitered on the stoop had vanished. The street was unnaturally quiet. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The loan sharks? She had borrowed $2,000 from a shady payday lender 6 months ago. But she was on a payment plan. Had she missed a date? She kept her head down, clutching her purse, trying to walk past the vehicles to her front door. Click. The back door of the middle SUV opened. "Miss Jenkins?" The voice was deep, smooth, and colder than the Chicago wind. Sarah stopped. She turned slowly. A man had stepped out of the vehicle. He was tall, imposingly so, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Sarah made in a year. He had jet black hair slicked back, a sharp jawline that looked cut from marble, and eyes that matched the old man's from the diner, piercing blue. But where Arthur's eyes had been confused, this man's eyes were predatory. He looked like a wolf in human clothing. This was Lorenzo Enzo Moretti, the capo dei capi, the boss of bosses. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling, despite her best efforts to sound brave. "I asked you a question," Enzo said, taking a step toward her. He didn't shout, but his presence sucked the oxygen out of the air. 2 other men, large and armed, stepped out of the flanking vehicles. "Are you Sarah Jenkins?" "Yes," she squeaked. "Look, if this is about the loan, I can have the money by Friday. I just lost my job and—" "Get in the car, Sarah." It wasn't a request. I'm not getting in a car with you. I'm calling the police." She reached for her phone. In a blur of motion, one of the bodyguards was beside her. He didn't hurt her. He simply plucked the phone from her hand with terrifying efficiency. "No police," Enzo said, buttoning his suit jacket. "We aren't here to hurt you, but we are pressing for time. My father is asking for you." "Your father?" Sarah blinked. The image of the shivering old man in the diner flashed in her mind. Arthur. The old man? Arthur? Enzo's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something, relief, annoyance, crossed his face. Arthur. Yes, he is unwell, and he is refusing to eat or take his medication until he sees the angel from the diner. That would be you. Sarah looked at the SUV, then back at her apartment building where her sick mother was waiting. "I can't just leave. My mum—" "Your mother is currently being attended to by Dr. Aris Thorne, one of the best specialists in the city," Enzo interrupted. "My men sent a nurse up 10 minutes ago to ensure she is comfortable. She is fine." Sarah's blood ran cold. They were in her house. They had her mother. "If you touch her," Sarah hissed, a sudden feral courage taking over. She stepped toward the mob boss, her finger raised. "If you hurt her, I don't care who you are, I will kill you." The bodyguards tensed, hands moving to their jackets. Enzo held up a hand to stop them. For the first time, a corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a smile. It was an appraisal. "You have fire," Enzo said softly. "Good, you'll need it. Now get in the car, Miss Jenkins. We have a long drive." Defeated and terrified, Sarah climbed into the plush leather interior of the SUV. The door slammed shut, sealing her in a world of silence and scent. Leather, expensive cologne, and gun oil. Enzo slid in beside her. "Driver," he said, "home." As the convoy pulled away, Sarah realized she wasn't just leaving her street. She was leaving her life. The man sitting next to her was radiating a dangerous heat, his eyes fixed on his phone, scrolling through messages that likely decided who lived and who died in this city. "Why me?" Sarah whispered, staring out the tinted window. "I just bought him a slice of pie." Enzo didn't look up. "In my world, Sarah, nobody gives anything for free. You did. That makes you an anomaly. And anomalies. They are either very valuable or very dangerous. I intend to find out which one you are." The drive took 40 minutes. They left the cramped, potholed streets of Bridgeport and ascended into the rarefied air of the North Shore. The silence in the SUV was absolute. Enzo Moretti tapped away on his phone, occasionally rubbing his temple as if he carried a headache that no medicine could touch. Sarah sat with her hands clamped between her knees, watching the city lights blur into the darkness of heavy woods. They turned off the main road onto a private drive blocked by a massive iron gate. A guard booth, manned by 2 men with assault rifles slung over their chests, stood watch. They waved the convoy through without a word. The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. It was a sprawling limestone beast that looked like it had been airlifted from the Italian countryside and dropped into Illinois. Floodlights illuminated the grounds, revealing high stone walls topped with razor wire that glinted in the moonlight. "Welcome to Purgatory," Enzo murmured, sliding his phone into his pocket as the car glided to a halt in front of the main entrance. A team of servants and guards waited on the steps. Sarah felt woefully inadequate in her stained diner uniform and worn sneakers. Enzo stepped out, buttoning his jacket, and the air around him seemed to sharpen. He wasn't just a man here. He was the king. "Come," he commanded. Sarah followed him through double oak doors into a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment building. A crystal chandelier the size of a small car hung overhead, but despite the opulence, the house felt cold. It smelled of lemon polish and steel. "Is he awake?" Enzo asked a severe-looking woman in a housekeeper's uniform. "Yes, sir. He is asking for the girl every 5 minutes." Enzo turned to Sarah. "My father suffers from vascular dementia. Some days he is the man who built this empire. Other days he is confused. Do not agitate him. Do not ask him about business, and do not lie to him. He can smell a lie better than a bloodhound." They walked down a long hallway lined with oil paintings of grim-faced men. Sarah shivered. She felt like she was walking into the belly of a beast. They entered a large, warm room on the ground floor that had been converted into a medical suite. Monitors beeped rhythmically. Arthur Moretti sat in a leather armchair by a roaring fireplace, a blanket over his legs. He looked better than he had in the rain, clean, dry, wearing a silk robe, but he still looked frail. When he saw Sarah, his face lit up with a genuine, childlike joy that broke Sarah's heart. "Sarah!" Arthur rasped, trying to stand. "The angel! Enzo, you found her!" Enzo's face softened imperceptibly as he looked at his father. He walked over and gently pushed the old man back into the chair. "I found her, Papa. Sit down." Sarah approached slowly. "Hello, Arthur. I'm glad to see you're dry." Arthur reached out and grabbed her hand, clutching it tight. "She bought me pie, Enzo. Cherry pie. And she stood up to that fat bastard Sal. She has the heart of a lion, this one." Arthur looked at Sarah, his eyes suddenly lucid and sharp. "You didn't know who I was. That's the best part. Everyone knows the name Moretti. Everyone wants something. You just saw an old man in the rain." "I just did what was right," Sarah said softly. "Right," Arthur scoffed. "Nobody does what is right anymore. They do what is profitable." He turned to his son. "Enzo, pay her. Give her $10,000. No, 50,000. "Papa," Enzo warned, his voice low. "I don't want your money," Sarah interrupted, withdrawing her hand. The room went silent. Enzo looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me?" Enzo asked. "I didn't do it for money," Sarah said, standing straighter. "I'm glad you're safe, Arthur. Really. But I'm not a charity case, and I'm not a pet. I want to go home now. My mum needs me." Arthur looked devastated. "But you just got here." Enzo studied Sarah. He walked around her slowly, like a shark circling a swimmer. "You don't want money? That is interesting. Because according to my files, you are drowning, Sarah Jenkins." He signaled to a guard by the door. "Take my father to bed. The nurse needs to check his vitals. Miss Jenkins and I have business to discuss in the study." "Enzo, be nice to her," Arthur shouted as the nurse wheeled him away. "I'm always nice, Papa," Enzo lied. Once the old man was gone, the warmth evaporated from the room. Enzo turned to Sarah, his eyes dead cold. "Follow me." Enzo's study was a sanctuary of dark wood, leather, and the lingering scent of expensive tobacco. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking a dark, churning lake. Enzo walked behind a massive mahogany desk and picked up a manila folder. He tossed it onto the desk. It slid across the polished surface and stopped inches from Sarah's hand. "Open it." Sarah hesitated, then flipped the cover. Her breath hitched. It was her life. Photocopies of her birth certificate, her social security number, her mother's medical records from St. Jude's Hospital, her bank statements showing a balance of $74.50. And on the bottom, a photo of the lone shark she owed money to, a man named Vinny the Roach. How did you get this?" she whispered, horrified. "I know everything, Sarah. I know you work 60 hours a week. I know your mother, Martha, has stage 4 kidney failure and needs a transplant that insurance won't cover. I know you borrowed $2,000 from Vinny the Roach, and with his interest rates, you now owe $5. Enzo leaned back in his chair, steeping his fingers. "Vinny is a low-level parasite. He breaks legs for fun. He was planning to pay you a visit on Friday. Did you know that?" Sarah felt sick. The room spun. I was going to pay him." "With what?" "Tips from a diner you just got fired from." Enzo shook his head. "No, you weren't." He opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it toward her. It was a receipt. "I bought your debt, Sarah. You don't owe Vinny anymore. You owe me." Sarah stared at the paper. "You paid him?" "I own him. It's different. But the result is the same. You are now indebted to the Moretti family." "I'll pay you back," Sarah said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'll get another job. I have a different proposal." Enzo stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the front of it. "What happened?" Sarah asked, stepping in front of Arthur protectively. "We found something," Enzo said, his voice tight. "The traitor I dealt with last night. He wasn't working alone. He planted something before he died." "Planted what?" "A transponder," Rocco grunted. "In the garden. They've been tracking us. They know the shift changes. They know the layout." Enzo walked to the window, staring out at the tree line. "The Rossis aren't just sending messages anymore, Sarah. They are coming for the throne, and they know exactly where to strike. He turned to her, and for the first time, Sarah saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for the liability she represented. "Pack a bag," Enzo commanded. "Small. Essentials only." "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, panic rising. "The estate is compromised. We are moving to the safe house." Enzo checked his gun, sliding it into his holster. "And Sarah, pray that the road is clear, because if they catch us in transit, there will be no negotiation." Just then, the perimeter alarm began to wail, a high-pitched, terrifying shriek that echoed through the limestone halls. Enzo cursed. Too late. He grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away from the window, just as the glass shattered. Crack! A bullet hole appeared in the mahogany bookshelf, exactly where Sarah's head had been a second ago. "Get down!" Enzo roared, tackling her to the Persian rug. "They're here!" The library was a storm of shattering glass and splintering wood. Enzo's body was a heavy, protective weight over Sarah. She could feel his heart hammering against her back, not fast with panic, but with the steady, hydraulic rhythm of a machine shifting into overdrive. "Stay down!" Enzo roared over the deafening crack, crack, crack of automatic fire tearing through the room. He rolled off her, rising to a crouch in a single fluid motion. He had a gun in his hand, a matte black pistol that seemed to materialize out of thin air. He fired 3 shots towards the broken window. A scream from the garden confirmed a hit. "Rocco!" Enzo barked into his lapel microphone. "Status! Breach at the north gate!" Rocco's voice crackled, barely audible over the gunfire. "They have a truck. They rammed the perimeter. We have at least 20 hostiles on the lawn. Heavy tactical gear." Enzo cursed in Italian. He looked at Arthur, who was curled in a fetal position behind a heavy leather armchair, hands over his ears, muttering names of people long dead. "We have to move," Enzo said, grabbing Sarah's arm. His grip was bruising. "The library is a fishbowl. If they get a grenade in here, we're ash." "Where do we go?" Sarah yelled, her ears ringing. "The panic room is in the basement, access through the wine cellar." Enzo looked her dead in the eye. "Listen to me, Sarah. You are going to take my father. You are going to run. You do not stop. You do not look back. If you see anyone who isn't me or Rocco, you shoot." He reached into his waistband and pulled out a backup piece, a snub-nosed revolver. He shoved it into her cold, trembling hands. "Point and pull," he instructed grimly. "It has no safety. Do not hesitate." "I can't shoot a person," Sarah cried, staring at the cold steel. "You can if they are trying to kill my father," Enzo said. "Go!" He kicked the library door open and unleashed a hail of covering fire down the hallway. "Move! Move!" Sarah grabbed Arthur. The old man was heavy, dead weight with fear. "Come on, Arthur. We have to go see your wife. She's in the cellar." Sarah lied, desperation fueling her strength. The lie worked. Arthur's eyes cleared. "Maria? Maria is downstairs?" "Yes, come on!" They scrambled into the hallway. The air was thick with drywall dust and the acrid smell of cordite. Sarah dragged Arthur towards the kitchen stairwell, keeping her head low. Behind them, she heard the booming report of Enzo's weapon and the answering chatter of submachine guns. He was holding the line. He was drawing their fire so she could escape. They reached the heavy oak door of the cellars. Sarah fumbled with the latch, threw it open, and shoved Arthur inside. She tumbled in after him and slammed the bolt home. The silence was sudden and terrifying. The wine cellar was a labyrinth of dusty bottles and shadows. It smelled of earth and old grapes. The only light came from the thin strip under the door. "Where is Maria?" Arthur asked, looking around the dark room. She's coming," Sarah gasped, pressing her back against the door, the revolver shaking in her hand. "We have to be quiet, Arthur. Like a game." Thud. Something hit the door from the outside. Sarah stopped breathing. Thud. Thud. "Open up, sweetheart," a voice sneered. It wasn't Enzo. It wasn't Rocco. It was a rough, gravelly voice she didn't recognize. "We know you're in there with the old man. Don't make us burn you out." Sarah looked at Arthur. He was staring at a bottle of vintage Chianti, oblivious to the wolf at the door. She looked at the gun. Point and pull. The wood around the lock splintered. A boot kicked the door again. The hinges groaned. There was no other way out. The panic room entrance was behind the furthest wine rack, but they wouldn't make it in time. If she ran, they would shoot Arthur in the back. She had to stand her ground. Sarah Jenkins, the waitress who apologized when customers sent back food they had already eaten, stepped away from the door. She raised the gun. Her hands were shaking so bad she thought she might drop it. She gripped it with both hands, trying to steady her aim at the center of the door. Crack. The door flew open. A man stepped in. He was huge, wearing a tactical vest and a ski mask. He raised an assault rifle. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut and pulled the trigger. Bang! The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. She opened her eyes. The man was still standing. She had missed. The bullet had shattered a magnum of champagne next to his head. The man laughed. Nice try, bitch. He leveled his rifle at her chest. Sarah froze. She waited for the flash. She waited for the end. But the flash didn't come from the man. It came from behind him. A silver blur flashed in the dim light. A knife, long and wicked, suddenly protruded from the man's throat. The gunman gurgled, dropping his rifle. He clawed at his neck, then slumped forward, revealing Enzo standing behind him. Enzo was covered in dust. His suit was torn. Blood, some his, some not, splattered his white shirt. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He stepped over the dying man, ripped the knife out, and wiped it on the man's vest. He looked at Sarah. He looked at the smoking gun in her hand. "You missed," he said, breathless. Sarah dropped the gun. Her knees gave way. Enzo was there before she hit the floor. He caught her, pulling her hard against his chest. He smelled of smoke and death, but to Sarah it was the safest smell in the world. "You didn't run," Enzo whispered into her hair. His voice was raw. "I told you to run." "I couldn't leave him," Sarah sobbed into his torn jacket. "I couldn't." Enzo pulled back, framing her face with his bloodied hands. The adrenaline was crashing through both of them, a potent cocktail of fear and relief. His blue eyes searched hers, frantic and intense. "You are insane," he murmured. "You are completely insane." And then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was a collision. It was the taste of survival. Sarah kissed him back, her hands clutching the lapels of his ruined suit, pulling him closer as if to anchor herself to the earth. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was only the heat of his mouth and the erratic beating of their hearts. "Enzo?" Arthur's voice broke the spell. They broke apart, breathing heavily. Arthur was holding the bottle of Chianti, looking concerned. "Enzo, you're bleeding on the floor again. Your mother will be furious." Enzo looked at his father, then at Sarah. A small, incredulous smile touched his lips. He rested his forehead against Sarah's for a fleeting second. "Stay here," he commanded softly. "Rocco is mopping up the rest. It's over." It took another hour for the estate to be secured. The police were paid off before they even arrived. The official story was a gas leak explosion. The bodies were removed by a specialized cleaning crew that arrived in unmarked vans. By dawn, the house was quiet again, though it bore the scars of war. Sarah sat in the kitchen, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was staring into a mug of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly. Enzo walked in. He had showered and changed into fresh clothes, though he moved stiffly. He dismissed the maids with a wave of his hand. He sat opposite her. He didn't speak for a long time. He just watched her. "The threat is neutralized," Enzo said finally. "The Rosses made a miscalculation. They sent their best men, and they lost them. They are weak now. By tomorrow night, I will have wiped them off the map completely." Sarah nodded numbly. "Okay." "You saved my father," Enzo said. "The gunman. He would have killed him first." "I missed," Sarah whispered. You stood your ground. That matters more. Enzo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the table and slid it toward her. Sarah looked at it. What is this? Payment? No, Enzo said. Payment is for employees. This is insurance. Sarah opened the box. Inside was a ring. It wasn't a diamond engagement ring. It was a heavy gold signet ring, crested with a hawk holding a sword. The Moretti family crest. This is my mother's ring, Enzo said quietly. She wore it every day. It means you are under my personal protection, not just as an employee, as something else. What does it mean, Enzo? Sarah asked, meeting his gaze. It means that if anyone ever looks at you the wrong way again, the entire city burns. He reached across the table and took her hand. You passed the test, Sarah. You stayed when the house was burning. You are one of us now. Sarah looked at the ring, then at the man who had brought chaos and passion into a small grey life. She thought of the rain, the pie, the fear, and the kiss in the cellar. She realized with a jolt that she didn't want to go back to the diner. She didn't want to be safe and poor and invisible. She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. So, Sarah said, a faint smile playing on her lips. What's the plan for breakfast, boss? Enzo smiled. A real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. Pancakes, he said. Arthur wants pancakes. 6 months later. The charity gala at the Four Seasons was the event of the season. The champagne was vintage, the caviar was imported that morning, and the room was filled with the city's sharks, politicians, CEOs, and socialites. But when the doors opened at 8 p.m., the room went silent. Sarah Jenkins walked in. Gone was the waitress with the tired eyes and the stained apron. In her place was a woman who moved with the lethal grace of a panther. She wore a floor-length gown of deep crimson silk, the color of spilled wine or fresh blood, depending on the light. Around her neck sat a diamond necklace that cost more than the diner she used to work in. On her arm was Lorenzo Enzo Moretti. He was in a tuxedo, looking every bit the prince of the city, but his eyes were fixed on Sarah with a look of possessive pride. And walking slightly ahead of them, looking dapper in a navy suit and holding a cane he didn't really need, was Arthur. They were the royal family of the underworld, parading in the light. Smile, darling, Enzo whispered in Sarah's ear as cameras flashed. Senator Miller is looking at you like he wants to audit us. Let him look, Sarah replied, her voice cool and amused. I have his mistress's travel logs in my clutch. Enzo chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated against her side. God, I love it when you talk like that. Sarah guided Arthur to their VIP table. The transformation wasn't just physical. Over the last 6 months, Sarah had taken over the legitimate face of the Moretti empire. She managed the charities, the real estate holdings, and the public relations. She had learned that a sharp smile could cut deeper than a knife. As they sat, a woman approached the table. It was Cynthia Vance, the wife of a rival developer, who had been trying to squeeze the Morettis out of the waterfront district. Sarah, Cynthia said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, I was surprised to see you here. I heard a rumor you used to serve coffee at a truck stop. Is it true? I'm dying to know if you can actually tell the difference between a salad fork and a dessert spoon. The table went quiet. Enzo stiffened, his hand twitching towards the steak knife on the table. Arthur frowned, looking ready to defend his angel. Sarah placed a calming hand over Enzo's fist. She looked up at Cynthia, her expression bored. It was a diner, Cynthia. Not a truck stop, Sarah said smoothly. And yes, I learned a lot there. I learned how to spot cheap tippers, bad liars, and people who think money buys class. Sarah took a sip of her champagne, holding Cynthia's gaze until the other woman looked away. By the way, Sarah continued, her voice dropping an octave, turning ice cold, I saw the permits for your husband's new hotel. It would be a shame if the Sanitation Commission found irregularities in the foundation. Concrete can be so temperamental when it's mixed with fear. Cynthia paled. She took a step back, nearly tripping over her own gown. Enjoy your evening, she stammered, fleeing into the crowd. Arthur cackled, clapping his hands. Did you see that face? She looked like she swallowed a lemon. That's my girl. Enzo looked at Sarah, his eyes dark with desire and respect. The war with the Rossis was over, buried under 6 feet of earth and concrete, but the war for respect never ended. And Sarah was winning it. Later that night, back at the estate, the house was quiet. Arthur was asleep, dreaming of his bakery in Sicily. Sarah stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, looking out over the repaired gardens. The moon was high. Enzo came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He kissed the curve of her neck. You were dangerous tonight, he murmured. I had a good teacher, Sarah said, leaning back into him. She fingered the heavy gold signet ring on her hand. Do you ever miss it? Enzo asked. The simplicity? The diner? Sarah thought about it. She thought about the aching feet, the rude customers, the fear of the electric bill. Then she thought about the man holding her, a man who would burn the world down if she asked him to. She thought of Arthur, safe and loved in the room down the hall. She turned in his arms, looking up into those piercing blue eyes. I missed the rain that night, Sarah whispered. But I found the storm, and I think I like the storm better. Tiopa. Enzo smiled, the predator finally at peace with his mate. Good, he said, picking her up effortlessly as he walked back towards the bed. Because the forecast calls for thunder. Sarah Jenkins, the waitress who saved a lost old man, laughed. It was a sound of pure victory. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the queen. And that is the story of Sarah and the Moretti family. From pouring coffee to ruling Chicago, Sarah proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is be kind to a stranger. She didn't just survive the Mafia, she tamed it. Now I have to ask you, what would you have done in that diner? Would you have given Arthur the $20, or would you have let Sal kick him out? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to read your theories. If you enjoyed this twisty, romantic ride, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a upload. I've got a story coming up next week about a billionaire who hires a bodyguard, who turns out to be his ex-wife. You don't want to miss that drama. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and remember, be careful who you help in the rain.